Good morning. Thank you, Kat, for the introduction. Thank you so much, Sadhviji, for joining us here. And thank you all of you all for braving the rain, the marathon, the traffic. I do know a lot of you all have been very eager to come and hear Sadhviji. And without much ado, I'm going to start straight away, Sadhviji. This is an amazing book, fascinating journey. But today we're going to try and explore how it is of relevance to each one of us. So, Sadhviji, reading this, I was completely fascinated to learn that you were 25 years old when you first came to India. And with your first sort of, you came because your then husband, he was looking for a guru. And you were very skeptical about, oh, India, all right. But when you first sort of stood on the banks of the river Ganga and, the entire sort of the mesmerizing experience you had. And 1997, you said, the year of transformation, the flash that happened where you gave up everything. You gave up your comfortable life, your PhD from Stanford, the marriage, etc., etc. That clarity that you had about jumping into the unknown was the complete unknown, the Parmarth Niketan ashram for you. Where did that clarity come from? And related to that is that for me as a householder, I have children, I have a husband, I have other responsibilities. Is that spiritual transformation possible for each one of us without having to become a sadhvi or a sadhu? Can I also explore my own inner being with the depths that you have?
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Puneeta ji. What a beautiful joy and blessing to be with you all. And I'm so touched and honored by your loving response to my book, Hollywood to the Himalayas. So yeah, it was an extraordinary journey. And as you said, I was not seeking or searching. Obviously, in retrospect, 27 years later, I would love to say I was seeking and searching. I would love to say that I had recognized the shallowness of the material world, the commercial world, and I was looking for something deeper and more meaningful. But that isn't true. At 25, having grown up in Los Angeles, California, quite literally in Hollywood, I learned what so many of us, regardless of where we're from, learn, which is that we're given this happiness equation. And we're told, if you want to be happy, here's what you need. You need a good education. You need a good degree from a good university or graduate school or whatever degree you're getting. You need a good job, you need to make a bunch of money, you need to look the right way in the right clothes, you need to live in the right area of town, you need to get invited to the right parties and vacation at the right resorts, and that this is what we need for happiness. And at 25, while I certainly had already inclinations that maybe there was something more. Maybe this wasn't really the answer. I didn't have anywhere else in which to hook my ideas. I didn't know anyone who was spiritual. I was not raised in a deeply religious or spiritual family. I was not someone who was religious or spiritual. I was an academic. I was a scientist. And I came to India, as you say, because I was in a very, very, very brief, very karmically important at that time, but totally separate subject, 3-year marriage in my early 20s from university. But it was perfect because that brought me to India. He was seeking, he was searching, and I agreed to come only because I was a very strict vegetarian. And I had traveled a lot in Europe, in England, around America. And being a very strict vegetarian, in places where you don't speak the language, where you're not cooking for yourself, is really difficult. And I knew that in India, at least, vegetarian meant vegetarian. Do bar puchna nahi padta, they know what it means. So I agreed to come, as embarrassing as it is 27 years later, just because I loved the food. But this is what we talk about, destiny and dharma and karma and grace. Because there I was standing on the banks of the Ganga River, a river I didn't even know was holy. And suddenly I had this extraordinary experience of divine connection. I had this experience of being in the presence of the divine that was everywhere in everything, but also in me. And I had grown up in a way that a lot of us do, even if we don't necessarily realize it, which is feeling that there is something not quite right about us. We're not beautiful enough, or we're not smart enough, or we're not funny enough, or we're not popular enough, or we're not pure enough, worthy enough, good enough. And I always had that feeling. And suddenly, here on the banks of Ganga, I had this experience of this omnipresence of the divine that pervaded everything, but also me. And it was the very first time in my life that the idea ever even occurred to me. Wow. You're one with the divine. Wow. You're not actually lacking in some way. There's not something wrong with you. You're not enough. That same divine that pervades all pervades you. And it was extraordinary. It knocked me to the floor, literally in tears. And I ended up, fast forward 27 years, I'm still here. I ended up staying. I knew in that moment that being there on the banks of Ganga was where I was meant to be. But something very interesting happened over that first week or so, amidst all of the other incredible experiences, which was I looked around at children living there, poor kids who had nothing. And there was a light in their eyes, a joy in their life that no one I knew growing up with in Hollywood, in Beverly Hills, no one I knew had that light in their eyes. And I thought, I need to stay here. There is a secret here. There is a secret to happiness. And I need to stay here to figure out what it is. And of course, by the time I had an understanding of what it is, this was home. As you say, for all of us who are not meant to lead a life of sannyas, I ended up taking vows of monastic renunciation, what we call sannyas in the Hindu tradition. And for me, that was the most natural path. I knew in that moment that this is where I was meant to be. But as you say, you're a householder. So many people are householders. And interestingly, if you look at our scriptures, the vast majority of the rishis and the sages and the yogis and the mystics, they're householders. There's very few monastics. If you go through the scriptures, you go through the Puranas, very few. And it's beautiful because what we're taught is the renunciation that you need for a spiritual path is not a renunciation of family. It's not a renunciation of the world. It's a renunciation of that which keeps you stuck. Your anger,
Your attachments?
Your attachments, absolutely. Your attachments, your expectations, your attachments to the money that I'm making, the possessions that I own, this idea that happiness is based on filling my shelf rather than realizing the fullness of myself. So attachment to things, but also attachment to ideas. Jo main chahti hoon, jis tarah se main chahti hoon, jab main chahti hoon. This is also attachment. I am right. Our ideas, our visions, our views of how things must be, what my life must be, how people should treat me.
The need to control?
The need to control, absolutely. All of that. We control. We control because we can't let go. That control is a death grip on life. And that death grip kills us. It suffocates us and it kills us. And that renunciation that is really required is a renunciation of all of that that's keeping me stuck. Whether it's past grudges or anger or identifications or attachments to things, ideas, how people are going to behave, how people treat me, how other people should live, whether it's expectations, whatever it is, that's what kills us. So we renounce that. And this brings us to, for me, when I finally wrote the book, it had been years, as you can imagine, from the beginning, people were saying, oh my God, you have to write your story. This young American Jewish woman from Hollywood with a degree from Stanford suddenly becomes a Hindu renunciant leader on the banks of Ganga. Like, from the beginning, people were saying, you need to write your story. But I had dedicated my life to service, to seva. One of the most beautiful things that my guru taught me when I first got there was stop asking what for me. That is not what brings happiness in life. Life's question is not what for me. Life's question needs to be what through me. Meri madhyam se kya, not mere liye kya. And in that shift, my life changed. But so when it came to writing the book, the idea of taking hundreds of hours to just write my personal, fascinating story, I thought, well, that's a lot of time. I mean, we're doing education and women's empowerment programs and environmental protection programs and water conservation, and where am I going to find the time? But I did it actually for this exact question that you just asked, because what I realized is it's not just my story. And this is what close friends of mine finally pushed me and said, this is not just your life's drama. This is actually a teaching for everyone, because that Hollywood way of thinking, which, by the way, sadly exists not only in Hollywood. It's all of the modern, what we would call sophisticated way of thinking. And it's the way of thinking that says you are your body. Its size, its shape, its color, its history, its bank account, its career, its followers on Facebook, its popularity. You are that. And that brings suffering. We suffer in ourselves. We compete with others. We feel not enough. And the Himalayan way of thinking says, you have a body, but you're not the body. You are soul, you are spirit, you are love, you are consciousness. And that's where suffering ends. And that, for me, really, Puneeta ji, is the yatra, the journey that is available for everyone. Doesn't matter where you live. Doesn't matter what your life's purpose or dharma or calling is. As long as we're living in a mindset that says, I am this story. what's happened to me, what I've done, how people look at me, how they treat me, what I have. As long as I identify as that, I suffer. And I bring suffering to others and to the planet. And if I can shift that awareness, my suffering ends, and I become an instrument of love, of peace, of healing for all.
Thank you. That was very beautifully said. So, but Sadhviji, one can go through a flash of insight, the beginnings of my spiritual journey. But as we were discussing yesterday, after the ecstasy comes the laundry, right? So there's a lot of self-work required, to heal my baggage, my trauma, my scars. And I want to come to one tool that you've been speaking about in your book, which is that of forgiveness, right? And forgiveness, not thinking that I'm Christ on Mount Sinai, I'm forgiving because I have to free myself, right? Lighten myself. And you spoke about the consciousness, expanding the space within me for more expanse, more consciousness. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because most people say, okay, I could forgive. No, I can ask for forgiveness. It's easy to ask. It's not so difficult to forgive, and not so difficult to forgive myself.
Beautiful. Yeah, forgiveness is most definitely a really core theme of the book, but it's also a really core teaching that I share and emphasize, because if we don't forgive, we are stuck. Kiss moksha goodbye if you don't forgive. Not because God is angry, not because God is saying, oh, you're not worthy, but because that chain that binds you to that which happened or to the person or people who did it, that keeps you from being free. Anger and grudges hold us in the past. They hold us stuck to a moment in time. And they prevent us from moving into the present moment. And whatever aspect of spirituality or self-development or mindfulness or meditation or yoga or anything that you are learning, there is one key point that everyone agrees on. We must be here now. If we are not present in the moment, we cannot be happy, we cannot be at peace, we cannot be fulfilled. I cannot be happy yesterday or tomorrow. And it's why all of these practices from all of the traditions from all over the world focus on bringing us into this moment. But anger keeps me stuck in the past, keeps me karmically tied to another person or a group of people, and it prevents me from being free. So we forgive not because what someone did is okay. And I'm going to repeat that because it's really important. Most of us say, well, to kaise forgive karo? My God, what that person did, it's unforgivable. And there are people who do things that by all objective or legal or moral or ethical standards are wrong and unforgivable. Our forgiveness has nothing to do with that. You're not the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. You're not the karmic police. What you are is spirit, soul consciousness in a human body with one main purpose, which is to wake up to the truth of who you are and to become free. And that freedom cannot happen as long as I am holding on to a grudge. So we let go not because we are absolving someone, not because we're saying, oh, that was great, could you please do it again? Not because we're saying that they shouldn't get their karmic dues, but simply because we are saying, whatever you did to me, I deserve to be free. No matter how much you harmed me, abused me, betrayed me, cheated me, I deserve to be free. And if we hold on to the anger, we are literally sacrificing our freedom, our joy, our peace on the altar of someone else's ego, arrogance, violence, ignorance. We're saying, oh, you harmed me once? No problem. Let me give you the rest of my life. You want my happiness? No problem. Here it is forever. You want my peace? Here it is forever. You want my freedom? Here it is forever. And so we forgive. Because no matter what's happened, you deserve to be free. And that's why I wrote all of the details of what had happened to me. People said to me, you've spent 25 years in India. At the time when my book came out, it had been 25 years. They said, you've spent 25 years in India. You've gotten a following, an impact, an influence, a platform. Are you really sure that at this point, matlab, you really want to tell everything? In India, in Hindi they talk about dhoti khulna, like taking off your clothes in front of everybody, and really, like, you really want to tell people all of that? And I realized that I needed to. And I needed to for this exact reason. Because I thought, if people don't know my story, then they look at me and they say, well, it's easy for her to say. She doesn't know what I've been through. She doesn't know my struggles. Easy for her to say. She has this beautiful life living on the banks of Mother Ganga. Yeah, she can say, forgive. And so in the book, I share a story that I had not yet shared publicly in all of the years I'd been in India, which was the challenge and the trauma that I had been through in my early childhood. The abuse that I had experienced, the abandonment that I had experienced in my early childhood, the addiction, the depression, the eating disorder that I had developed as an adolescent. And I shared all of that so that no one would ever say, well, she doesn't understand. And so that everyone who reads it would feel like, oh my God, I can do it. Exactly. If she can do it, I can do it. And we're given in this beautiful spiritual culture, we're given so many spiritual leaders who are, in most cases, men. And in most cases, they're men who I say basically came out of the womb enlightened. They're stories of people who basically from early childhood, they knew they weren't interested in girls, they weren't interested in sports, they weren't interested in school. They knew from early childhood, this is the only life I want to live. They wanted to meditate, they wanted to be near the saints, they wanted to do satsang. And they're beautiful stories. They're awe-inspiring stories. They make you want to bow at the feet of those masters. But they're not necessarily stories that make people think, oh, he did it, I can do it.
Yeah, the identification, yeah.
And I realized I've been given a story of struggle and of challenge and of just absolute humanity in terms of the anger and the pain and the grudges and the desires and the yearning and the longing and the experiences, so that no one would ever feel like grace or awakening or divine connection or spirituality was something that they were disqualified from, or that there was some prerequisite that they didn't have. And so I've shared all of it. And that forgiveness for me, that moment where I stood in the waters of Mother Ganga and had to forgive, was the most powerful experience that I had ever had in my life at that point. It was something I didn't think was possible, but it was. It happened. And what I've realized over all of these years is forgiveness is the key of others and of the self. So whatever you've done, whatever has been done to you, if you walk away from here with one takeaway, let go. Because whatever you're holding on to is what binds you. There's that great story of the city that was overrun with monkeys in India. And of course in India we're non-violent, so nobody's going to go and take guns and kill them or put out monkey poison.
And we have a monkey god also.
Exactly,
Hanuman. Yeah.
exactly. So nobody's going to harm the monkeys. So they were trying to figure out what to do, and they came up with this brilliant idea. They took coconuts and they hollowed out the coconut, and they put inside the coconut a sweet, a piece of fruit, something that the monkey was going to just love. And the monkey would reach into the coconut, grab the sweet. But the trick was they had made the hole in the coconut just big enough for an empty hand to go in, and too small for a closed fist to come out. And so if the monkey closed its fist around the treat, it was stuck. Now if you've got 4 legs and one of them is in a coconut, you can't run, you can't climb, you can't swing from branches. And so the monkeys became very easy to capture and take back into the jungles. But the kicker here is that anybody who has studied biology or the very basics of Darwinian evolution, we know that they are our closest DNA relatives. And so we'd like to think that they would be intelligent enough to let go, to realize they're stuck, let go of the sweet, bring their hand out, and run away.
And free themselves in a way.
But they never did. And I love the story because that's exactly the situation for us. We grab on to something. And this is that death grip on life that you and I were talking about earlier. That thing that I think is going to bring me happiness, joy, agar bas isko mil jaye, to fir main khush ho jaungi. If I just could have this, to fir ekdam set ho jayenge. That thing that we are grabbing onto, that we are controlling, that we are attached to, that becomes what makes us stuck. And so the key becomes letting go so we can be free.
Thank you. Yes. So I'm just going to ask you very briefly before we open it up to questions. You know, in India we keep talking about, well, all over the world now, but the divine feminine. We have many goddesses, Shakti, Durga, and all the different forms that we worship. But we have a very complex relationship with women, and religious India even more so. We talk about equality, but we are aware that the Swami and the Sadhvi are not necessarily always on the same platform. And I know you've struggled with this, and but you've come to terms with it, and you've said, it's helped you to anchor yourself deeper. But just to help us now, Sadhviji, about, as women, how do we negotiate through this, keeping in mind all the tools that you've shared with us?
Sure. Yeah, I always joke that I went from being a girl to being a woman to being a girl. Because in America, you're a girl when you're a kid, but by the time we were teenagers, and certainly by the time I was in university, we were referring to each other as women. You would never say, oh yeah, this girl in my class, after you were 16, 17 years old. We would say, this woman in my class, this woman here. And that at 25, when I moved to India, I became a girl again. Because in India, if you're not married, you're a girl.
So what you call ladki?
And yeah, ye ladki. Not just ladki, videshi ladki. So I always joke about that. But it's definitely on a deep and serious level, it's definitely an interesting situation because we worship the divine feminine. With love, with bhav, with so much devotion. It's the only culture in the world I know of that honors and celebrates and worships all of these aspects of the Mother Goddess. We have sacred Ganga Arti every night. We celebrate Navaratri twice a year. We bow to all of these aspects of Mom. And yet, whether it's in our homes, whether it's in our companies, whether it's in our societies, we know the real situation. And in religious world, it's challenging. It's absolutely still, in many cases, a man's world. I have been in a scene that I describe in my book. I've been actually, as a sannyasi, as someone who had been a sannyasi already by 15 years at that point, I was actually kicked off of a stage simply because I was female. But being told this is a Mahatma stage, as though somehow the great soul only resides in the body of a male. And it's a very interesting situation that we are working on. A lot of us are working on this because there is a reverence. There is a love, there is a celebration, there is a devotion. And we just don't necessarily make that bridge from our mandirs and our mantras and our puja into our homes or our societies or our environments. And for me, what I've learned, the easy place for us to go is in a dichotomy. Either they're right and I'm wrong, and I should pray that in my next birth I'm born in a male body so that I am worthy of occupying the same space, or I am right in this glorious, exquisite, divine, feminine form, and therefore they are wrong. And it's very easy to fall into that dichotomy situation where someone must be wrong. And what I've experienced and learned really deeply is that the answer is a yes and. And for me, it was an experience of yes, I revere, I love, I honor, I celebrate, I give my life to a dharma, a tradition, in which this sort of thing could even be seen as possible. I honor, I revere, I celebrate, I bow down to the saint whose stage it was, and I honor and I revere and I celebrate this feminine form. and it's the exact form that I want to come back in over and over again. And that there doesn't need to be someone or something that is wrong. It can be a yes and. And for me, it's been really an experience of creating and finding a spaciousness, an expansiveness within myself, rather than needing to get into the something is wrong in order for something else to be right. And if we can drop into that, whatever the experience is. But just lastly, in the world, I think it is critically important for women and for men to very consciously make sure that our reverence of the divine feminine is not only in our temples, and that we really recognize that Lakshmi, that Durga, that Saraswati is in our wives and our sisters and our daughters and our mothers and the women in our societies and on the streets, and that there is no God, goddess, supreme reality that makes any sense to me at all who would give us blessings for doing puja of Lakshmi in a mandir if we walk out of that mandir and we harm in word, in action, in thought, in policy, that very form of Lakshmi living amongst us.
Thank you, thank you.
And so we do yes and. We, on a spiritual level, drop into spaciousness so that we are not just reactions, because otherwise we don't actually benefit anyone. So we drop into that spaciousness, that perfection of creation. And when we stand up from our meditations, we stand up full of vigor and energy and vision to actually bring about change in our world. And whether this is around gender equality, whether it's around environmental destruction, whether it's around water, whether it's around human rights abuses, whatever area we're looking at, the message is the same. In our meditations, we anchor into that spaciousness, that perfection, that infiniteness, that oneness, that divinity. And we rise from our yoga mats, from our meditation cushions, in these very human bodies with hands and legs and brain, and we bring about the change, as Gandhiji said so beautifully, that we want to see in the world.
Thank you, Sadhviji. Sadhviji has very kindly said that the last 5 minutes she will take us through a short meditation. But we have 10 minutes left, so a couple of questions only. And I would urge you to be short with your questions so we can take a bit more. There was this lady right in front. Yeah. Would you like to give her the mic quickly, please? Yeah.
Good morning, Bhagawati ma'am and Puneeta ma'am. My question is that, according to me, Hinduism is the way of life. May I know your opinion on Hinduism? And in present scenario, what is the contribution of Hinduism to the world?
Wonderful question. It's absolutely a way of life. This is why we actually refer to Hinduism as Sanatan Dharma. It's a dharma, it's not a dogma. It is an eternal way of life. And in eternal, we mean not only in time, but in space, meaning it is just as applicable for people in Los Angeles, New York, London, Tokyo, as it is for people in Kurukshetra, in Ayodhya, in the places where our scriptures were given to us, in the Himalayas. Just as it is equally applicable today as thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago when it was handed down to us. Absolutely, it is a way of life, and that is why we're seeing So many people from so many other traditions and cultures turn toward so many aspects of the Dharma for truth, for awareness, for inspiration, for insight. Absolutely.
Thank you. Just one more question. Okay. Sorry. When you get your book signed, you all can quickly also talk to Sadhviji. Yeah, sorry.
Namaskar, Sadhviji. So, Hindu scriptures have reiterated again and again the importance of being detached. Talking about detachment from body and past experiences and impressions, and the importance of forgiveness, which you just highlighted. There is a practical difficulty most people my age face. How much ever we try to forgive abuse of past, something in the present happens that triggers it. Every abuse of the past plays before your mental screen, leaving you feeling that such and such thing happened with me, rather than thinking such and such thing happened with my mind or body. So how do we approach this?
Great, great question. So, the human body regenerates in full every 7-8 years. Different parts of the body regenerate more quickly. The skin cells take only a few days. But if you go all the way down into the organs, our kidneys, our liver, our internal organs, some of them take up to 7 or 8 years to fully regenerate. But what that means is that if you're standing before me more than 7 or 8 years after something has happened, there isn't a single cell in your body to which it happened. By the time I stood in Rishikesh, in front of Puja Swamiji, in the waters of Mother Ganga, there was no cell of my body that had been abused. Now, I was saying I, but where's that I? Kai, show me the one who was abused. Literally, she doesn't exist. Now, that doesn't mean to negate or minimize the harm of what was done, but it helps us recognize it wasn't me. So that's a really powerful awareness. And of course, in most of our cases, it wasn't our liver or kidneys that were harmed. It was, the skin cells. And every few days, those regenerate. So we focus like that. There's also, lastly, I'll leave you with a beautiful practice called Niti Niti, which is usually done in a meditation, but I'm just going to give it to you quickly, which is, so that we can do the other meditation before we leave. Niti Niti literally means not this, not that. Now, you begin by saying, I am not my shawl. I am not my clothes. And you go layer by layer by layer, not my skin, not my blood, not all of the parts. Now we know that. I know that I'm not my skin or my bones or my blood or my organs. But then slowly you get to the point where you say, I am not neurotransmitters, right? I'm not serotonin, I'm not norepinephrine, I'm not dopamine, I'm not chemical reactions, I'm not electrical reactions. But if you're not those, it means you're not your thoughts or your memories. Every thought, every memory, every feeling state, every emotion is a chemical and electrical pattern of behavior in your brain. That is all it is. If you are not chemistry and you are not electricity, you are not your thoughts or your memories or your emotions. And so when a situation arises, the moment the mind gets triggered, just say, Neti, Neti. You're not chemistry. Your soul, your spirit, your divinity. You're not an electrical response down an axon. Your divinity. And just remember who you are. And keep anchoring back in that. Detachment is a different subject, which we'll have to take up another time. But this will help you navigate those emotionally triggering moments of anger and grudge and pain. Just recognize it's not me, and I am not that reaction. Keep anchoring back in self, in truth. Exhale. Realize you are not just one of Pavlov's dogs. You're not a stimulus response experiment. You are divine. And as such, you have the power not to just react.
So reclaim your power back then, yeah? Right.
Reclaim the power that comes with the awareness. It comes with the awareness of who you really are.
Thank you. So, Sadhviji, we have 3 minutes before the buzzer is going to go off.
Okay.
So, I hand it over to you to lead us through a very quick meditation.
3 minutes. All right. That's okay. It's been a beautiful full hour. So let us all just take a moment. Just close your eyes, because meditation is not a doing, but it's an undoing. And it's an undoing of that which is not self. And a return to the self. So it takes just a moment. And just allow yourself to exhale very deeply. And as you exhale, allow yourself to let go. On each exhalation, just let go. Let go of another mask that you wear. Let go of another role that you play. Let go of an identity, a personality, a history that you hold on to. With each exhalation, just let go. And allow yourself to sink deeper and deeper into the core of the self. Letting go on each exhalation. And exhaling so deeply that as you exhale, you sink down, free, into that spaciousness, into that presence of infinite light. That is the source within you. Drop deeply into that light, into that truth. Into that love. And just allow yourself to expand into that light, into that infinite spaciousness at the core of your being. Slowly and gently open your eyes. So beautiful to be with you today. Thank you so much, Puneeta ji. It's been
Thank you.
such an honor.
Thank you, Sadhviji. That was really amazing. And thank you for your time, your energy, your wisdom, your love. Thank you.